Welcome to today's lunchtime presentation. On behalf of the Engineers Ireland, particularly the Civils Division and Transport Society, you're welcome to hear today about the government's road safety strategy, or phase two of the action plan that's just been launched this year. Really important plan for the country, where we unfortunately have an increasing number of accidents at the moment, and we all know, or most people who are on this call will be clear, that engineering is one of the big parts of that. Not the only part, but it is a big part of that. So thanks to Thomas for joining to present the strategy, and I'll introduce him in more detail in a second. But firstly, I just remind people that the Civil Engineering Division will be running a BIM for Infrastructure series starting in the 28th of January, and this is a new approach from us, in that we are, rather than running monthly lectures, we're going to have a series on a 4-week series on a specific topic. And this year we're looking at BIM, and as I mentioned, that will start the 28th of January. Really important for everybody in local authorities, consultants. Consultants are probably ahead of the posse on this rather than the public sector. So it will be really opportune time to learn what we are required to do now under OGP guidelines. And also on the 22nd of January, the Transport Society will be having a lunchtime lecture on the TII MOVE tool, which is the Mobility and Outdoor Value Estimates tool, and that'll be on the 22nd of January. So today, Thomas Campbell, who's the head of the Road Safety Division in the Department of Transport, has joined us to present the phase two of the action plan. Thomas has responsibility for road traffic legislation, the development and coordination of government road safety strategy and action plans, and corporate governance of the Road Safety Authority and the Medical Bureau of Road Safety. So significant responsibilities in the road safety realm. He's previously held a number of roles across the Department of Transport and the Department of Public Expenditure. I'm not going to give the full name. We all know what it is now. He holds a BA in Philosophy, Political Science, Economics, and Sociology from TCD, and a Master's in Public Policy from UCD. So welcome, Thomas, and hopefully we get a clear understanding of what the phase two road safety strategy is. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. I'll just share my presentation. So just to confirm, yeah, that's Sharon. Thanks, Joe. So I don't think I need to introduce myself. I think Joe has done that quite comprehensively there. So yeah, the purpose of, I suppose, this afternoon's presentation, and thank you all for coming along and giving me a half hour of your time, is to outline, I suppose, where we are now with the government's road safety strategy, and in particular the phase two action plan that Joe mentioned that we published in July. And there's some interesting things to note about the phase two action plan that I'll come to during the presentation in terms of ownership. The third part of the presentation then will look at some developments since publication, and to be honest, if I was doing this presentation in 12 months' time, there would be quite a bit more to report here, but I'll outline some updates from the department in particular, and then some concluding thoughts and remarks that might inform the Q&A at the end. So the first, for those who aren't familiar with it, with the road safety strategy, the first one was published in 1998. And that's at a time when annual road deaths were over 450 each year. And if you go back even a decade before that, I think in the 80s, they were up over 600 at a point. So while things have in the past 5 years really gone in the wrong direction, the downward trend that we've seen has started to go upward, and we want to reverse that. When you look back a little bit further, we have made huge progress as a country, and it's important not to lose sight of that while also still trying to continue progress. So Department of Transport obviously has an important role in it, TI and so on. So strategies, and there has actually been a bit of commentary about this recently in terms of overall ownership of road safety for government. That is tricky though, because there are so many stakeholders in the sector. The strategies aim to bring those stakeholders together with the aim of reducing deaths and serious injuries on our roads. And I've listed out kind of some of the key stakeholders you might expect to be involved in any road safety strategy. And since it was established in 2006, the RSA led the development and coordination of these strategies under the Road Safety Authority Act 2006, but the oversight of it remained with the Minister of Transport through the Ministerial Committee on Road Safety. The current strategy, which is a 10-year strategy, was published in December 2021 by then Minister Naughton for Road Safety and Liz O'Donnell, who was chair of the Road Safety Authority at the time. And it adopted Vision Zero as formal government road safety policy, which targeted a 50% reduction in road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. That's compared to 2017 to 2019, the average in those years, and as close as possible to no road deaths or serious injuries by 2050. So that's the Vision Zero. Vision Zero has also been adopted by the European Commission, and I think all but 2 member states of the EU as well. So we're following kind of EU best practice and EU example by adopting that goal. And then the strategy is divided into 3 implementation phases, each underpinned by an action plan. So phase 1 ran from December 2021 to the end of 2024. We are now in phase 2, which runs to the end of 2027. And the third phase then will be 28 to 2030. And the idea of that is that as new technologies emerge or as trends emerge, we can react and be responsive to that throughout the 10-year period. And then the actions are grouped into 7 safe systems pillars. Again, this is a methodology that's best practiced globally. I think it was started out in Norway or Sweden, and it focuses on different aspects of road safety and what we can do in those different domains to make a positive impact. So safe roads, safe speeds, safe vehicles, safe road use, post-crash response, safe active modes, and safe work-related road use as well. So this is kind of what I touched upon in my introduction. You can see where we were in the late 90s, kind of a little bit between 400 and 500 deaths a year. And since the publication of the first government road safety strategy in 1998, road deaths have declined by about 2/3. The lowest year is 2021 with 133, although obviously there is an important caveat to that in terms of the restrictions on travel during that period. But then you can kind of see on the right-hand side of this graph that since 2021, we have been going upward again. 2024 was a small decrease in 23, but unfortunately, as of today, I think there's been 170 road deaths this year, which is only 3 less than all of 2024, and 7+ on this time last year. The phase 1 action plan, when it was published, contained 50 high-impact priority actions and 136 support actions. And then we had 4 additional high-impact actions added during phase 1 by various ministers during that. So things like updating the Learning to Drive curriculum, and there's a few other important ones in there that just escaped my mind. But it meant that by the end of phase 1, we had 190 actions in total. Relevant to the NTA and the sustainable mobility area of the department as well, there was some degree of overlap and alignment between the road safety strategy and the sustainable mobility policy and action plan. So 17 actions were reflected in both, and that really reflects that while we invest in, say, better public transport or better active travel, and that has a climate impact, it also tends to have road safety impacts as well, and usually positive if we deliver good infrastructure. Significant achievements during phase 1 included the completion of the speed limit review in September 2023, the rollout of additional safety cameras by Garda Síochána working with local authorities and TI over the past 18 months or so, completion of the Irish Motor Insurance Database, which allows Gardaí at the roadside to tell, based on registration data, if a car is insured or not, using their mobility apps. So I think the detection rate of non-insured vehicles has increased dramatically over the past couple of years, and the publication of the new cycle manual, national cycle manual as well. And by the end of 2024, of the 190 actions, 169 were either complete or on track. The on track ones tended to be continuous actions at a defined end date, and then only 21 were either delayed, blocked, or deferred. So on that metric, you could argue that the phase 1 action plan was very successful. We delivered most of what we set out to achieve. But then when you go back to the slide showing the trends over the past 4 years, it would be hard to argue that we have been successful. Clearly, something in our approach isn't working right now. And that was a big focus in phase 2. How do we go about this more effectively? And the phase 1 governance, I mentioned earlier the Ministerial Committee on Road Safety. So that would be the kind of overall mechanism through which the Minister for Transport exercises oversight in the road safety area. And that was complemented during phase one by a senior officials group, the Road Safety Transportation Partnership Board, comprising the senior leaders of the various agencies and departments that are involved in delivering the action plan. And then below that, we had a mix of standing and ad hoc groups at a working level. So we had on the one side 3 enabler groups that were standing throughout the period of phase one, focused on legislation, funding, and data. And I suppose some of the successes from those enabler groups were work around penalty points that led to the Road Traffic Act 2024, and work around collision data sharing between An Garda Síochána, the RSA, and local authorities. And I'll come back to that at the end, because while the approach has been agreed, that issue is still not fully resolved with regard to local authorities. And then we had some kind of special purpose working groups as well, focused on, for example, speed limits and the development of a national camera strategy. And those also worked quite well during phase one. So moving on then to phase two, an important part of the background and context to phase two was the Indicon review of the Road Safety Authority that was conducted during 2024. As Joe mentioned at the outset, as well as having responsibility for government's road safety strategies, my division in the department also exercises corporate governance of the Road Safety Authority. And in line with our requirements under the Code of Practice for the governance of state bodies, we commissioned this independent review of the Road Safety Authority, which you're supposed to do, I think, on a 5-year basis for all of your agencies. Also, at the time, the RSA was facing some external challenges in terms of its funding model and with the delivery of the NCT and the driver testing service in particular. That work was, as I said, carried out across 2024. We brought the report to government in November of last year, and it called for a restructuring of the RSA and a separation of its public interest functions from its cluster operations. So on the one hand, you might have a more focused driver and vehicle services agency like you have in the UK doing the operational aspect of the RSA, and then what people probably most associate the RSA with, which is their education, their campaigns. That would be a focused agency on those areas as well. But among the review's recommendations and relevant to this presentation was that the department should take over ownership of the road safety strategy from the RSA, and that was given coordination challenges that the RSA encountered in terms of dealing with government departments and other agencies. It was felt that it would be more of an indication of commitment from government if a government department and minister was over the strategy. So that was put into effect as part of phase two. The development process for phase two, it was a little bit complicated in that the responsibilities in terms of coordination and development shifted from the RSA to the department over the course of development, which meant that the RSA was initially the body responsible for the development of the action plan, and they appointed EY to assist with that process in August 2024. But then, given the recommendations in the Indicon review, which went to government in November, the department became the de facto client over time towards the end of last year and the first half of this year as the action plan was finalised and then published. As part of that development, EY conducted extensive bilateral engagement and interviews with the different stakeholder agencies to obtain their feedback in phase one, to see what had worked well, what hadn't worked well, and delineate their actions and priorities for phase two. But then, as the department took over responsibility for the action plan and strategy process, all final decisions and content were made by the department and the minister ultimately. One of the most consistent pieces of feedback that we got from stakeholders was that there were too many low impact actions and too many business as usual actions during phase one, and that the reporting burden was too great as a consequence. And I think that's evident when you look at the fact that we delivered 90% of what we set out to achieve during phase one, and yet the fatality and collision numbers went in the opposite direction. And a new body that was established, or a new means of us gaining insights and feedback from road users, was the Road User Safety Forum that was established in September 2024. And that comprises 10 road safety advocates from a range of different backgrounds and perspectives. So we have active travel users, pedestrians, cyclists. We have representatives from disability groups, representatives from families of victims of road traffic collisions. And that was a really useful source of feedback and advice during the development process. And we've actually, as a consequence of that, amended its terms of reference. So the forum will continue to advise us on implementation and emerging issues over the next couple of years during phase 2. The phase 2 action plan then was published on the 16th of July, just before government went in recess for the summer. And reflecting the feedback that EY gathered during the development process, we have 12 primary actions in the phase 2 action plan compared to 50 during the phase 1 action plan. And these actions are expected to deliver a significant road safety impact, and they require significant cross-sectoral collaboration to deliver as well. Those actions include things like substantial infrastructure investment, including into roads and active travel, the development and implementation of strategies around connected and autonomous vehicles and intelligent transport systems, the continued rollout of the speed limit review and speed limit changes on urban roads and national secondary roads, increased camera enforcement and increased automation of that process to reduce the burden on the Gardaí and the courts, increased coordination of road safety education work. The RSA is very active in that space, but other stakeholders do a certain amount of education as well, and trying to bring that together and make sure that we reach as much of the student population as possible. And also bringing forward programme for government commitments around introducing graduated penalties for speeding and alternative sanctioning. And that means things like installing alcohol interlock in a car for someone who's been disqualified for drink driving, or putting someone on a speed awareness course for perhaps low levels of speeding. If you're a certain level above the speed limit, perhaps rather than penalty points, you have an option to attend a speed awareness course. And those primary actions then are complemented by 77 supporting actions to be delivered by the different stakeholders. And these can be quite significant actions in their own right as well, but they're distinguished predominantly by the fact that these are often within the domain of a single agency that don't require as much cross-sectoral collaboration. Some of the developments since phase 1 then, the brand identity of the action plan has shifted quite significantly. So on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you can see how the phase 1 action plan looked, and that's very much in the RSA's brand. And then on the right, you can see the updated branding to align with Government of Ireland requirements. And then at the bottom, you can kind of see the updated Vision Zero logo as well, again aligning with Government of Ireland brand identity. We significantly reduced the number of actions, and we tried to have a much sharper focus on the high impact areas of work. To reduce the reporting burden for stakeholders, primary actions will be reported to the department on a quarterly basis, but supporting actions will be reported on an annual basis or by exception if there's a blockage requiring departmental attention or the attention of some other stakeholder. Again, really with the aim of reducing the amount of time people spend generating reports and allowing them to work on actually implementing the actions. We have developed a reporting portal in-house that I'll come back to. Previously, the RSA had commissioned the reporting portal used during phase 1, and now that the action plan is under the department, I would hope that we will develop the phase 3 action plan. I suppose we'll start doing at some point during 2026. We'll do that entirely in-house as well. And as I mentioned, the Road User Safety Forum is going to continue beyond its original terms of reference to provide feedback on the development of the plan, and will now advise us on implementation and emerging issues from the various perspectives on the group. And then the governance arrangements for phase 2 have been simplified as well. So we've had the Ministerial Committee on Road Safety. That's a committee going back a long number of years, I think certainly until the early 2000s. And then below that, we previously had the Road Safety Transformation Partnership Board, but those have been merged into a new Road Safety Leadership Group. Given that there's a significant degree of overlap of the attendees, it was essentially one meeting was with the minister, one meeting was without the minister. Now those two meetings have been brought together, and we had our first meeting in that configuration on the 5th of November, and it will continue to meet quarterly over the coming years. The Road User Safety Forum, over the coming couple of years as well, the intention is that will meet probably 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the Road Safety Leadership Group, and any issues that they identify will then be brought to the Road Safety Leadership Group for the Minister's attention as well. So there'll be a direct line of feedback between the Road User Safety Forum and the Minister throughout phase 2. And I also mentioned on an earlier slide that we had a mix of ad hoc and standing working groups during phase 1, and we have dropped the idea of having standing groups because the standing groups really only worked effectively when they had a specific task to work on. So the legislative group was tasked with analysing penalty points and recommending reforms to the minister. The data group is tasked with developing the framework for data sharing to be restored between the guards and the RSA and local authorities. And in those pieces of work, they were quite effective. But when they didn't have a particular piece of work to work on, they were a little bit listless. And on the other hand, the special purpose working groups looking at speed limits or looking at the national camera strategy, for example, they were quite effective as well. So from now, during phase 2, we'll stand up these working groups as required and as requested by the minister, but there won't be enabler groups running throughout the period. Moving on then to some developments since publication. As I mentioned, the department has developed a new monitoring portal through which stakeholders will provide quarterly updates on their primary actions and then an annual report on their supporting actions. And I've included some screenshots of what that looks like here. At present, however, the action plan was published in July, so we spent the summer months getting the baseline data, and we're going out now to stakeholders probably before Christmas with a deadline of the end of January to come back with updates against their actions. So it means that this presentation is a little bit early for me to give you much of an update on where we are in terms of the different actions under the action plan, just simply because we haven't got the first round of reporting data back. But hopefully then on a quarterly basis going forward in 2026, we'll have a good picture of the 12 primary actions, and then once a year, the what stakeholders have done against their supporting actions. So that means I'll focus on what I do know a little bit more about, which is what has happened in the Department of Transport over the past 4 or 5 months since we took over the action plan. So last month, the government announced the budget for 2026, and over 1.7 billion has been allocated to investment in roads infrastructure and road safety measures next year. I think that's an increase of about 200 million on 2025, and reflects, I suppose, this government's shift in priorities away from the 2-to-1 ratio that existed during the previous government. So while we still invest in quite a lot in public transport and active travel, that ratio that existed in terms of investment is no longer in place. 360 million will be allocated for investment in walking and cycling infrastructure, so that commitment from the previous government is being maintained in terms of spending almost €1 million a day in active travel. And then the RSA will ring fence 18 million for investment in its public interest work next year, which they did this year, and they'll carry that forward into 2026 as well. If you're not familiar with the RSA's funding model, it generates income from the services it delivers, so the driver testing service, NCT, and so on, and then it reinvests that in the public interest work, which means sometimes public interest work would be a casualty of the financial situation of the RSA, in that it was always a surplus that it could invest in that, but the ministers require them to ring fence 18 million for investment in that work, and then we can consider as well if there may need to be increases to fees for certain services to fund that, but it means there's guaranteed funding for the public interest work. It's not contingent necessarily on the performance of the services. In terms of policy updates, Minister O'Brien issued a direction to local authorities on 16th of October with regard to urban speed limits, for them to review and define their urban areas and to identify roads that are suitable for a 30 km/h bylaw based on statutory speed limit guidelines, and with a target date for those new speed limit zones to be operational no later than 31st of March 2027, which is an ambitious target, but the rural rollout was also quite ambitious as well, and we did manage to achieve that more or less, and I think it is important that we do try to be ambitious in this space. And then Minister Canny signed the new regulations around multiple learner permits on 5th of November, which will take effect from 1st of November next year. And what those mean in effect is the existing practice whereby you can basically have an unlimited number of learner permits without ever sitting the test. All you need to do to get a permit, the 4th permit or greater, is to have booked a test. It's probably a little bit of a loophole in the legislation previously that you didn't actually have to sit the test. Going forward, once you get your 3rd permit, you'll have to either pass a test or you begin the learning to drive process again. So you'll have to do your 12 EDTs and your driver theory test and so on. And that 12-month lead-in period is to give people currently in the system time to adjust and to book a test and get ready for a test. In terms of some legislative updates, The general scheme of the National Vehicle and Driver File Bill was approved by government in April, and it's on the government's priority for drafting list in the current legislative term. So the Office of the Parliamentary Council, who draft legislation on behalf of the government, they're currently working on the bill. We would hope to see that published early in the new year and to make its way through the Oireachtas and to be enacted in the first half of next year. And among the main provisions of that bill, that's the vehicle through what local authorities will be able to receive and process collision data directly again, no longer relying on the analysis conducted by the Department Support Office, but able to do their own analysis. And it will also enable the introduction of paperless discs for NCT, CVRT, motor tax, and insurance. So for most drivers, you won't need to display discs on the windscreen anymore, and that's been enabled by the widespread rollout of the automatic number plate recognition software and technology for Garda Síochána, where for the most part they don't need to review the discs anymore anyway. They kind of stand at the roadside, or they can drive past in road-facing vehicles and know instantly, based on NVDF data, if someone is non-compliant with those requirements. The ministers have also approved the provisions to be included in the next road traffic bill. So we tend to pass road traffic bills every 2 or 3 years. It's a fairly regular cycle. And we'd aim to present that to government for approval to draft early in the new year as well. And among the main provisions of that bill will be programme for government commitments around graduated penalties and camera-based enforcement. And then the consequence of the fact that we pass road traffic bills quite regularly is that we have about 23 different road traffic bills on the books in one way or another since 1961, which was the last Consolidated Road Traffic Act. And there's a dedicated team now working between the department and the Law Reform Commission aiming to pass Consolidated Road Traffic Act in the coming years, which will make it simpler for users to understand the law, but also hopefully close potential loopholes that might exist and that do arise now and again in the courts. And another area of work where, as the department has taken on this role in the past 4 or 5 months, we're beginning to get a little bit involved in is engagement with the local authority sector. So I can't speak for exactly how much engagement that the RSA had with the local authority sector when it was overseeing the strategy, but we've engaged with a few different working together groups and a kind of group of different road safety officers. And a call that we're hearing, and I'd be interested to hear feedback from the group on this, would be more of a coordination role for the department in terms of local road safety plans. Those road safety plans are independent from the national strategy, and they have a much older statutory basis. They come from the 1993 Roads Act, whereas the first road safety strategy was 1998. So our intention wouldn't necessarily be to change that. It's an important function for local authorities to carry out, and they know their kind of road safety issues better than central government. But there may be ways we can improve alignment, maybe the application of the 7 safe system pillars at a local level, including specific targets for improvement infrastructure in local areas where kind of budgets or problem areas are known, and the applicability of actions from the national plan at a local level. And I've listed some out there that would be particularly relevant. And then, for the department, coming back to us, I suppose, at the minute, road safety plans aren't submitted to the department for review. They perhaps do go to the Department of Local Government and Housing, but maybe there's a role for us then to advise and review those plans and give feedback on them. Even though we don't have an approving role, maybe we can try to ensure there's better coordination between central government and local government. So to conclude and then open up to questions, following a disappointing phase 1 of the current road safety strategy in terms of fatality targets, phase 2 marks a new approach, which is more focused on high impact actions. And it also marks the first time since the RSA was established in 2006 that the Department of Transport will be leading the coordination of the strategy, having already controlled oversight functions in terms of ministerial committee. Now we have the kind of administrative and coordinative role as well. But it is important to say that the RSA will remain a very important strategy partner, given its central role both in the delivery of road safety services and road safety education and awareness. We've also tried to simplify the governance arrangements and reduce the reporting burden on partners. We set up the Road User Safety Forum in September of last year, and that will continue to advise the department and the minister on emerging issues and implementation problems. And as I kind of touched upon in terms of the local authority aspect, but perhaps different areas as well, the RSA has overseen the road safety strategy for close to 20 years. We've only been doing it now for 4 or 5 months. So we're very open to suggestions on things that you think could be done by the department to improve coordination in the sector and to carry out that coordinative role differently and more effectively than has previously been the case. So thank you very much. I know these slides will be circulated after the event. My email is there, so happy to take any questions by email following the event.